Hey, it's Stu, just getting situated, and this is going to be a reading review where I'm going to go over briefly the books I've read in the last little while. I'm going to say what I liked or didn't like about them, or something that stood out, and I probably won't say that much about the synopsis or go into too much detail about the synopsis. First, I'm not really a plot focused reader, and also I'm a reader that likes to go into books mostly blind, and so that is reflected in how I review or recommend books to other people. Okay, so the first book that I want to talk about I did on audio, and that book, it was Till by Daniel Kelman, and the translator was Ross Benjamin. It took me a while to get into Till. I guess the big picture premise is that this is a story of, really the story, it's a historical fiction, and it's a story of the Winter King and Queen from Prague, late 17th century, mid to late 17th century, told through the sort of lens or around the life of, I guess, a mythological historical figure named Till, who was a court jester. We go in and out of sort of like timelines and even points of view in this book, and it does make it a little bit hard to follow, or like maybe just lost me in a few places. I was really, really engaged in the book and then kind of fell off a little. But to be fair, that kind of happens with listening. I'm not necessarily a historical fiction enthusiast, but I did really enjoy ultimately this book, especially after finishing it. I learned a lot, or was reminded of a lot of the history of the 30, there's a called the 30-Year War, and this sort of like, as you know, as we can talk about sort of Game of Thrones and dispute over territory, and certainly the 1-year reign of King Ferdinand and Queen Elizabeth is an interesting story, still told to this day. I visited Prague a couple of years ago, and learned about them a little bit. So who should read it? People who like historical fiction, and especially can like it told through, like the concept of the court jester, I really appreciated, and I thought that was a fantastic sort of lens with which to view. So if you're interested in like the role of a court jester, or like looks at, there's definitely social commentary in this, but like at, decorum and who got to break it, and the court jester kind of its function being that, like basically the role of a clown in society, then this would be a great book for you. Another book that I read fully digitally, I don't have a physical copy of this book, was Laura Crane Hill's Wife-Shaped Bodies. This is a speculative body horror novel that takes place in some distant future when there's been some kind of like nuclear apocalypse, and the women have been infested or impacted by mushrooms. So there's sort of, women are part of the ecosystem. Men become even more frightened of women that they were and are in what is now contemporary times, and create sort of like a compound where women are murdered and or controlled with violence. Meanwhile, fungus and mushrooms are growing out of their bodies, and they're taught to modify their bodies in ways in order to get married. It's absolutely forbidden to have relationships with other women. And thus we have this sort of speculation on this sort of like body horror speculative novel that's really looking at, feminism and its place to fight patriarchal oppression. Okay. Next, I did Hybrid. The Knockout Queen by Ruthie Thorpe. I mostly listened to it. There was a little bit of time in this book. I had previously read Margot's Got Money Problems, which is Ruthie Thorpe's most recent novel, and I thought it was okay. Like, there were some things that I really liked about what that novel was trying to do. And then I think, if I can recall, well, what I do recall is that I also had quite a bit of criticism about it. I assumed that the Knockout Queen was sort of like a women in sports, which I, if I get around to doing shorts for a bingo that I've done and am doing this summer, then this fits the women in sports category. And I thought that it was going to be sort of like this story of a boxer and, you know, what women boxers have to do to, you know, make their way in a very male-dominated sport. So that's, I guess, the joy of going into books blind, because this book was not about that at all. This is like sort of like Catcher in the Rye style coming of age. The main character is, well, we get to know the Knockout Queen, whose name is Bunny, through the lens of our protagonist, who is the kind of Colin Caulfield type, Colin Caulfield? Wait. Anyway, character who is young, a teenage, queer, poor protagonist living in North Shore. And this book offers a lot of social commentary and discussion around predatory gentrification, around the absence of social mobility and opportunity for contemporary youth, around the penile and the the penile industrial complex, and around friendship. Yeah, around friendship. It's a feminist work. It does way better at the social commentary, I thought, than Ruthie Thorpe's other book, which was that I've read, which is Margot's Got Money Problems. And I actually found myself kind of kicking my feet a little about this book. I enjoyed it much more than I thought I was going to. And I think for that reason, because I kind of came in with lower expectations and then it ended up doing things that I didn't expect it to do, I ended up like maybe reserving or being more hesitant about some of the criticisms that I might have had otherwise. The last book that I did almost completely audio, just on audio, was Lenia Maja Ernst's Waist Deep. I'm sorry, I no longer have the copy, and I can't tell you who the translator is right now, and I do apologize for that. It must be Lenia Maja Ernst. Okay, this is very much sort of like a St. Elmo's Fire type situation. It's a bunch of folks who were friends in high school who are, you know, gone through college and are now in that sort of state in adult life where you're supposed to be an adult, but you're not really quite an adult yet, and you're supposed to have things figured out, but you may or may not have yet. And this is a queer group of folks. There's a lot of just sort of like musing in this book, and then a lot of sort of explicit sexual content. So it was a like interesting mix. It's also a very summer book. So if you like musings, this sort of like the St. Elmo's Fire vibe is your vibe, or you're just looking for a book in translation that's a great queer summer read, then I can recommend Waist Deep. Okay, another hybrid book that I did was Automatic Noodle by Anzeli Newitt. I was probably about 50-50. This was hybrid. I listened and read in this physical copy. It's a novella, and it's a cozy. In fact, I got it. I had this book. I found it in a little free library, but it was a recommendation from off of Libby from the library to fulfill one of the prompts in the bingo that I'm playing. And so although I have other books that I might want to use for that prompt, I thought, why not grab it? It seemed a bit fun. Definitely queer vibes in this book as well. We have, it's in the sort of near future, I think it's the 2060s. California has, so it's speculative, California has ceded from there's been a war between California and the US, and robots have a bigger place in society and are gaining some rights. This is told through, this story is about and has a point of view of the robots. They make a noodle shop. It is sort of like didactic and liberal in some ways, but it's mostly social commentary, sort of about, using speculative fiction and robots to kind of create the commentary or begin the discussion around criticism, really, about fear-mongering and xenophobia and resistance to change, and those sorts of themes that are really relevant always, but particularly in our current climate. Intemperance by Sonora Jha. I also went into this book, I knew that this book was about a middle-aged protagonist who was holding a competition, which has some traditional roots in Hinduism. I mean, it was like somewhat, from what I understood from reading the book, ancient traditional roots on this competition for her hand in marriage. And this is I would call it a masterful work of feminism. It raised a lot. I mean, it looked at feminist ideology and views from multiple perspectives, and still maintained a story with a clear plot and a protagonist that I really liked, who was flawed. So her character development is quite good. And although, I learned a lot, it didn't come across as incredibly nor academic nor didactic, although it was really dense with feminist themes. This comes under high recommendation by me. This is probably one of my favorite books that I read of this bunch. But again, this book isn't for everybody. If you like to read feminist themes and you want a great middle age, she's 55 and she's got a disability and according to the text, and is 20 pounds overweight, and that's what she basically puts on the profile for the men to show up for this competition, which that little detail even in and of itself was fantastic. Be sure to read the little note from the cover artist at the end if you do pick that book up. Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. This book had been on my TBR for such a long time. It came under high recommendation from a reader that I deeply appreciate their opinions. And I kept being like, I need the right headspace and time and place to read this book. I went to a silent reading activity, a big silent reading gathering, and I read most of it there. And I was able to kind of immerse myself in the book. And sometimes I'm able to do that. And sometimes I know I read a lot. I'm told often that I read with a lot of depth of understanding and attention to detail, even though I read a lot and quickly. But how immersed you are in a book, I mean, I think all readers can relate to this. That kind of depends on so many things. The book, what's going on around you, what you read before, during, and after, so like your state of mind or your state of mood at the moment. And so I was able to get immersed in this book the way that I wanted to. And it wasn't an incredibly easy read. It's not a difficult read, but it's not really like easy peasy. It requires a little bit of work, this read, to stay in. And I mean, the work definitely pays off. You get you get Nigerian mythology, you get an exploration of identity, gender identity, mental health from a non-Western lens, but written for a Western readership. And I deeply, deeply appreciated the gift that was those perspectives offered to me by this book. This is definitely a book that should be reread. I normally give away all of my books, and I'm wondering if first I held this under such anticipation and it did not disappoint, but also if, okay, I cannot give one out of all of the books that I'm presenting to you away with hopes of rereading it again, sort of with a different state of mind or state of mood, and see how much more of this book lands. So that's where I am with this. I did read it for the myth legend prompt on the bingo board that I was doing. Okay. Empress by San Xia and translated by Adriana Hunter. This was on my summer reading last year. Then it sat on my TBR, I have a little tiny TBR shelf, which is books that I'm like, I'm really gonna commit myself to reading this for May, for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and I didn't get to it, and then I kind of just refused to take it off the TBR shelf because I kept pushing it off. In my defense, I understood this to be about an empress, and I am not super enthralled about books about royalty. They're just not necessarily my cup of tea. I like to read with a lot of range, but I also have clear preferences, and celebrity and royalty aren't something that I feel really engaged with. And it's also, I understood it to be quite epic, and I have to be in the right mood for an epic. And it was those things. And I did struggle a little because of me problems, because of those things. But in the end of the day, I'm really glad that I read this book. This is historical fiction. From what I understood from having read this book, that China had one empress who was the emperor, meaning she was the highest power. So one person with a female gender who was the highest power doing, I think it's the Tang Dynasty. And she's a very controversial figure, but we understand that history doesn't remember women well because of reasons of misogyny and patriarchy, not necessarily because of how they acted, meaning we know the double standard, and also just the probably need to defame powerful women because the powerful women are and always have been a threat to the patriarchy according to oppressive patriarchal values. So Shansa, attempted to write this book, and this is very, I use the word Game of Thrones for Till. This was very much, and if you were alive this century and watched the Game of Thrones or knew about Game of Thrones a little bit, I would sort of use that as my modern pop reference to this. This is very Game of Thronesy. There's a lot of needing to stay in power and do whatever it takes, including really atrocious things to keep power, and a lot of power maneuvering, chess playing in this book. It's told in the first person. I often don't love first person unless it's done incredibly well, but I think the choice of telling this in the first person was important because we wanted to really get the perspective of, this really unique historical figure, in that she somehow got to rise to power as a woman. And yeah, I enjoyed, I don't know, if you like epic, if you like historical fiction, if you want to learn a little bit about the things that I just said, I would recommend this book. It's well written, and I mean, I could bring up some criticisms, but why bother? I think because for me, because it's epic and because it's royalty, I was already kind of had my guard up, so I wanted to just get from it the things that I got from it, which was awareness and some perspective. Okay, I have not yet finished, but I'm close. The Elusive Moth by Ingrid Winterbach, and it is translated from the Afrikaans by Iris Grover, and the author, it says. So there's that. Okay. There is plot in this book. There are characters who I really cannot stand, the sort of creepy sheriff. This book is set in South Africa in 1990. It was written, published in 1994. So set right about the fall of the apartheid, or apartheid still going on in this book. There's clear division between black and white, and it is brought up in this book in a way that I felt uncomfortable with at some times. Albeit I'm not a scholar of apartheid or South Africa, and I'm not aware of how much social criticism is really happening and how much just like, really, let me just tell you how things are. What's clear is that there is injustice, and there's a creepy, I'm going to call him a sheriff, law enforcement person whom I don't like. That is all kind of peripheral. This is more of an internal work. We have an entomologist. She's looking for an elusive moth. She's feeling lots of kind of ways about letting down her father, who's passed away. So we get a lot of just like scenes in a snooker hall, and not a whole hell of a lot happening. Some of the writing is quite good. I find myself enraptured with some of the actual prose, and then I kind of fall out of the story. To be fair, I've had to pick it up and put it down quite a bit, and that could be it. And it is a very slow moving book. I'm not yet finished, so I don't know if she's gonna, nail the landing or not. This was an award winner, when it came out, and it's a recent translation by Open Letter. So I don't have fully formed opinions about this book, and I would understand if anybody's like, well, then why are you reviewing it? Because quite frankly, South Africa was a FIFA World Cup country, and a moth is an animal, so it fulfills a couple of the bingo boards that I don't need, but I'm donating every book that I've read that fulfills them to the Friends of the Library, so that they can keep their bingo rack display stocked with appropriate books. So that's why I'm talking about it now, because I will finish it the next couple of days, but I'm not going to make another video. Almost for sure it's summer. I've got lakes to be at and walks to be on, etc. So that's why I'm reviewing without having done and not fully formed feelings. But I mean, this is a very indie press. So if you should happen to want to read a little bit by this author, look her up a little bit. I have a couple more books by her, and I'll give at least one more a try and see how I feel. The last book I'm going to talk about today is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, translated by Jeffrey Troselot, maybe is how you pronounce that. Okay. This book was given to me by a friend who didn't love it, and I can see why this friend thought that way. I've also heard some mixed reviews. It has been out for a while, but I liked it for what it was trying to do. I thought that it could do a little bit more maybe than what it did, but overall the concept, this is a time travel book where you get an opportunity to go back or forward in time and meet someone, and basically all of it is say what you wish you could have said. before, but there are limits, right? You can't do anything that'll change the present. The present won't change. You can't change the present, which seems a little bit too on the nose, right? As a sort of like central theme of this book. But you also have to you only have the time while the coffee's hot. You have to do it before the coffee gets cold, which is a little bit more subtle of like of a metaphor. But we have, I think, four stories basically of folks, and you get a little bit of insight onto the relationships of the two people, the one who is at the cafe who wants to time travel to have this brief conversation with a loved one. And yeah, for the most part, again, a little too on the nose. There's some like a little too gimmicky, in my opinion, and times, and some things it could have done more. But overall, it's a good, cozy read. Gives you a little bit to think about. It's a novella. It's only like 210 pages. And I was able to kind of read it in a sitting and enjoy it in the sun. So if you're just looking for a cozy and maybe something that, you know, makes you think, but maybe not too much, depending on how far you want to take it, I guess, then this is a great book for you. This was recommended by my library for the soothing prompt for the bingo card, and I guess I might make shorts for the bingo card recommendations, or I might just donate them with little cards on them where they're going. But this is definitely a cozy. It's a time travel, which is another prompt. The library recommends it, which is another prompt if you wanted it for that. And there is a prompt, animals, and I know that's interpreted a lot of ways, but there's absolutely an animal on the cover of this book, this cute little cat. So you could use it for any of those. You could just use it for a nice, cozy, definitely sort of more fall vibes in this one for me than summer. But again, I enjoyed it for what it was. And that concludes the pile of books that I've read, and I will probably see you again at most likely another reading review video. If I, it's summer, so if I get around to it.